You are about to pay more for every subscription you own. You haven't seen the bill yet, but the mechanism for the price increase was just activated, not in Silicon Valley, but in the quiet political capital of one of the world's most stable economies. On the surface, this is a policy decision about streaming. Underneath, it is an irreversible marker signaling the death of the frictionless internet economy. The headline read like niche cultural news: Canada's government has finalized the implementation of the Online Streaming Act, which will force major international streaming platforms, led by Netflix and Disney Plus, to contribute financially to the domestic content industry. But the true story is not the policy itself. It is the $100 million annual injection, a digital levy essentially, that sets the precedent. For years, these global platforms have operated in a geopolitical gray zone, selling content across borders while sidestepping the financial obligations borne by traditional national broadcasters. This system was built on a psychological principle that digital services should be untaxed and unburdened because they offer limitless consumer value. But Canada's move just punctured that psychological bubble. The question is no longer if other nations will follow, but how quickly. The truly surprising fact lies in the structure of the payment. It's not a voluntary fund. It is a mandatory financial contribution equivalent to a percentage of their revenue within the country. This isn't just about cultural preservation. It's a massive covert shift in power. For decades, the media industries of the world, print, radio, television, were protected by national borders and regulatory fences. The internet tore those fences down, creating a digital free-for-all where content flowed freely and money flowed back to a handful of American technology companies. This Canadian decision is a radical reversal, a sovereign nation successfully reasserting its digital economic border. The mechanism is elegant and powerful. If you want access to our consumers, you must now invest in our domestic system. This is a quiet declaration of economic independence that directly challenges the operating model of every major tech-enabled content platform. So what does this actually mean for the 37 million Canadian households, and by extension, for you? It means the era of cheap, borderless content dumping subscriptions is over. Behavioral economics tells us that companies rarely absorb new costs. They externalize them to the consumer. The $100 million levy is a cost that will be factored into the regional pricing matrix, inevitably leading to a subscription increase or a reduction in content spending that you will feel. This isn't just about cultural funding. It's about the unbundling of the global streaming dream. The moment one nation successfully forces a tech titan to pay a toll for market access, it establishes a template that every other nation, from Paris to New Delhi, is now analyzing. This shift exposes a profound vulnerability in the trillion-dollar streaming model. The promise was centralized efficiency. The reality is an impending fragmentation. But the levy itself is only the first layer. The true challenge to Netflix is hidden in the mandate that comes with the money. And that is where the real stakes for international content models begin. The money is one problem, but the real power play is the invisible requirement that the platforms must now adhere to. Canada isn't just asking for cash, it's demanding control over the algorithm. This is a quiet, yet devastating, structural challenge to the core mechanical advantage of the entire streaming industry. The hidden mechanics of the Online Streaming Act do not stop at the financial contribution. They also empower the regulator to ensure Canadian content is discoverable. In the world of streaming, discoverability is oxygen. The algorithm, the proprietary recommendation system that drives 80% of what you watch, is the platform's most valuable asset. It's the psychological engine designed to optimize for your attention, not necessarily cultural importance. Forcing a platform to prioritize or boost domestic content, even slightly, means manipulating the core logic of their psychological engine. This institutional psychology reveals a critical conflict. The nation-state is asserting that its long-term cultural stability is more important than the platform's short-term attention optimization. The most surprising mechanism here is the historical parallel that makes this move so potent. It echoes a physical world policy that the US itself uses: local market protection. Consider the requirement for local ownership of radio and TV stations, or even certain tariffs on foreign goods. These are all mechanisms designed to protect a domestic market from being completely overwhelmed. Canada's decision is the digital version of that tariff. It's an undeniable nudge forward for other G20 nations who are tired of being mere consumers of US-created culture. Crucially, the European Union's Audiovisual Media Services Directive already requires platforms to reserve at least 30% of their catalog for European works. Canada is taking the next step, regulating not just the supply of content, but its promotion. For the regular user, this generates a powerful, if subtle, connection to their daily experience. If the algorithm is told to prioritize Canadian content, even just at the margin, your personalized for you screen changes. You might be nudged toward a Canadian documentary or a domestically produced drama you would have otherwise never seen. This is a subtle but profound use of behavioral engineering by a nation-state. By influencing the choice architecture of a global platform, they are subtly altering the viewing habits of millions. The stakes are immense, not just who owns the content, but who controls the psychological path that leads you to the content. It's a battle for the subconscious attention span of an entire country. This forced algorithmic adjustment is the part nobody expected. It moves the conversation beyond mere taxation and into outright content regulation. But if Canada is the first to re-engineer the algorithm, what does this new precedent mean for countries that have far more aggressive content controls? And what happens when the dominoes really start to fall across the global south? This Canadian move is not an isolated policy. It is the starting gun in a global race for digital sovereignty. The world is watching. And specifically, the global content economy sees this as the validation they've been waiting for to redraw the economic map. How other countries view this development can be distilled into a single, powerful economic principle: internalizing externalities. For years, international streaming platforms have enjoyed the economic benefit of vast, engaged consumer markets while externalizing the cost of cultural and economic degradation onto the host countries. This externalized cost includes the slow erosion of domestic film industries, the loss of jobs for local creatives, and the homogenization of content. Countries like France, South Korea, and Australia, with their fiercely protected cultural industries, see Canada's success as proof that the digital giants are not immune to national interest. It provides a legal and economic blueprint. They are now evaluating not just the cost of replicating the levy, but the immense long-term benefit of forcing the world's most powerful distribution systems to fund their domestic creators. The historical parallel that escalates this tension is the shift from 19th century trade tariffs to 21st century digital levies. In the 1800s, nations used physical tariffs, taxes on imported goods, to protect nascent domestic industries from established foreign competitors. This policy helped fuel the industrial rise of several global powers. What Canada has done is apply this exact, proven protectionist mechanism to the immaterial flow of digital culture. The surprising connection is that this is not a new idea. It's an old, powerful, and effective power structure insight applied to a new domain. It formalizes the idea that data access and consumer attention are now the most valuable commodities a country possesses, and they should be taxed accordingly. The behavioral insight that makes this relevant to everyone is the principle of the sunk cost fallacy, as applied to corporate strategy. For Netflix, the Canadian market is not a small, trivial territory. It is an established, high-revenue market with significant sunk costs in infrastructure, content licensing, and brand recognition. They cannot easily walk away without forfeiting years of investment. This gives the Canadian government enormous leverage. Companies will pay the levy and likely pass the cost to the consumer because the sunk cost of leaving the market is psychologically and financially higher than the cost of compliance. This is a powerful lesson in digital geopolitics. Smaller nations can leverage the immense size of the giant's existing investment to dictate the terms of market entry. This is the central pivot. The Canadian decision flips the power dynamic. It shifts from a model where platforms dictate terms to one where sovereign nations reclaim their regulatory authority, but it gets deeper. Because while the focus is on the streaming giants, this same blueprint is already being eyed for the next, much larger battle: the global taxation of search engines and social media. The true shockwave from Canada's decision will not hit the boardroom first, it will hit the creative economy. This is not about a $2 price increase. It's about a radical, sudden redistribution of production power and job creation. What this means for workers, families, and creative stability is a monumental positive pattern interrupt. For every dollar channeled into the mandatory content fund, a new dollar is supporting local writers, camera operators, editors, and set designers. This creates a firewall against the cultural brain drain, where local talent is forced to move to major U.S. production hubs just to find consistent high-budget work. This policy stabilizes regional economies by generating high-quality creative jobs that are non-exportable. It turns a large U.S.-based company into a forced patron of national art, creating a more diversified, resilient, and less volatile media ecosystem within the country's borders. The part the media isn't discussing is the silent, immediate shift in capital markets. Historically, major global studios budget based on a global projection and prioritize U.S.-centric content that travels easily. This Canadian move injects a sudden, guaranteed, and mandated source of capital directly into a regional market. This isn't theoretical tax revenue, it's production money. It creates an investment floor, giving confidence to local venture capital and private equity to invest in content production infrastructure that was previously deemed too risky. It's an overnight guarantee that the domestic film sector will have a significant and consistent budget, regardless of the whims of the U.S. market. The real-world impact for the average global citizen is the acceleration of hyper-localized, high-quality content. This Canadian blueprint proves that a nation does not have to be a major superpower to dictate terms to a digital giant. When countries like India, Brazil, and South Africa, nations with immense consumer markets and a fierce desire to promote their own distinct cultures, adopt a similar mechanism, the creative landscape changes fundamentally. You, the viewer, will be exposed to a richer, more diverse menu of international storytelling, moving away from a single, dominant cultural voice. This is the death of cultural hegemony, delivered through a policy mechanism. The Canadian decision is not just about streaming. It is the proof of concept for how a sovereign nation can successfully manage, regulate, and benefit from the unstoppable flow of the digital economy. It is the moment the internet's borderless promise met the nation-state's unwavering need for financial and cultural stability. Because while everyone is focused on the $100 million streaming levy, the real shift is already happening, quietly, and in the place no one expects: the multi-trillion-dollar battle for control over your search history and news consumption.